from Florida is now recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Gaetz.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's quite something to hear my colleagues reflect that we shouldn't be able to observe conditions regarding Justice Ginsburg because she's left the court when they impeached a president who had already left the Oval Office. Mr. Paletta, I wanted to give you an opportunity to extend your remarks regarding instances of racism that you believe Justice Thomas encountered as a consequence of his skin color and his politics.
Sure. I think it's I have it in my written testimony too. It's this narrative that Justice Thomas is a lackey of Justice Scalia, of Judge Silberman when he was on the court, and the writing is all that he is incapable of being a justice, which is so belied by the facts. He's the most independent thinking justice probably in history. He writes the most opinions per year of any justice. When the documents came out from Justice Blackmun, it showed that from his very first conference, he voted in dissent on his own and brought 3 or 4 justices over to him in the first case that they dealt with. And time and time again.
I'm sorry, is it an attempt to try to invoke a racist trope that black people are not as intelligent and thus are more persuadable?
Yes, and if you look at the current attacks on Justice Thomas, where Philip Bump writes that Mayor's piece dances around the question of how much influence Ginny Thomas has over her husband. The one person Clarence really listens to is Virginia. Michael Kranish's piece in the Washington Post quotes Democratic operative Mark Fabiani wondering aloud whether there is a single opinion that Justice Thomas has ever written that is inconsistent with his wife's far-right wing views. So he is following her. And it's just the most offensive thing in the world when you read a lot of court watchers who are serious about the court, they know that Justice Thomas is the leader of the originalist wing and brought Justice Scalia over to his side, probably more than Justice Scalia ever brought Justice Thomas over to his views on the areas where they disagreed.
When someone calls a black person an Uncle Tom, is that a racist attack?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a disgusting attack.
Do any of the other panelists dispute that testimony? Does anyone think that there's a non-racist way to call a black person an Uncle Tom? How should we think about the fact that the chairman of the January 6th committee, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, used what all of you concede is a racist attack against Justice Thomas?
Congressman Jeffries asked me for an example. I gave it to him. I'll let others just address it, but I just think it is indicative of the hatred that is directed towards Justice Thomas for his views, which in fact, if you look, I wrote an article on this of comparing Justice Jackson and Justice Thomas's views on a number of issues in terms of polling, and by and large, Black Americans rank and file agree, I think, on abortion, on guns, on voter ID, on across the board. And yet somehow he's portrayed as being an Uncle Tom or a sellout or whatever the disgusting characterizations are. And it's just this continual attack on Justice Thomas. And thank God he's had the backbone to never bend in the face of these attacks. And I think this hearing today is a continuation of that. Everyone's focused on Justice Thomas. And let me just address the January 6th case, where that case has to do with executive privilege over internal White House documents between the president and his closest advisors. They have nothing whatsoever to do with Ginny Thomas's communications with Mark Meadows. Those wouldn't be covered by executive privilege. So Justice Thomas was voting on a document, on documents that were not at all related to his wife. So, that's why I say up until this point, there could be cases down in the future, as every justice does. When the case comes before the court and they look at the litigants, they look at the parties, they look at what's at issue, they decide whether they recuse.
So that I understand your testimony, you believe it's a racist trope to designate Justice Thomas as like uniquely unintelligent or persuadable. You believe it's a racist trope to call him an Uncle Tom, and you believe that this committee is a continuation of that effort.
Yes, And I believe it was, yes, I believe it started when he first came to town in 1980 and joined the Merrigan Ministry.
Let's hope it ends. I yield back.
We now turn to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, for 5 minutes.